Hello, faithful PseudoPod listeners. We'd just like to remind you that we've produced extra episodes of PseudoPod in our Century of Horror showcase from last year that are available to subscribers only.
It was almost as though some artist had made a sketch freehand of Pan before the tiles went to the kiln, and it had lain under the glaze for years until time and wear had brought it back to the surface. I had no hesitancy about knowing it was meant to be Pan. The little forehead horns were very clear now, and the lush, sensuous lips could have belonged to none other. Pan, in the deep wood, admiring a dryad, with all the connotations of a satyr.
The subscriber-only status allows us to present you some works by famous name authors which cannot appear thanks to various rights constraints in the free PseudoPod feed.
Most especially, most emphatically, they did not talk about what everyone knew but hesitated to admit even in whispers, that by this time next month they would probably be at war.
So please consider subscribing, as it will currently get you extra exclusive episodes of PseudoPod. You're hearing bits from them right now.
It is a sobering thing to come across a woman sprawled in the gutter with her intestines sliding from the shredded ruin of her womb. But you do not react. You do not distract the dead from their repast. They are slow and stupid, but that is all the more reason for you to be smart and quick and quiet.
Access to these extra PseudoPod episodes will end on December 31st, so please consider subscribing immediately so as not to miss them.
Their attack was tenacious but not suicidal. Some of the children fought back, and some of them fled. Mrs. Beatty's class had had enough and evacuated the building quickly. The entire melee rapidly moved outside, with children scattering in every direction and dozens of townspeople converging on the school. The battle was brief.
And thank you all again for being faithful listeners.
Welcome to PseudoPod, where the coffee is black and the fiction is dark. Actually, the coffee's usually got milk in it, and occasionally sugar, but the fiction may distress you. Consider this your warning, and maybe a request for coffee.
PseudoPod, episode 573, December 15th, 2017. This week's story, Bitter Perfume, by Laura Blackwell. Hey everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alasdair, your host, and this week's story comes to us from Laura Blackwell. It was originally published in the She Walks in Shadows anthology, edited by Silvia Moreno-Garcia and Paula R. Stiles in October 2015, that was published by Innsmouth Free Press. Prime Books issued the American edition, which is called Cthulhu's Daughters. This is its first reprint. One thing that may be interesting to some listeners that Laura asked us to point out: you may recognize characters and story elements from H.P. Lovecraft's Cool Air. That's because this story was written for She Walks in Shadows, an anthology of stories containing female characters from Lovecraft's fiction. All contributors to the anthology were women. The anthology actually won the 2016 World Fantasy Award in the anthology category, and Bitter Perfume received an honourable mention from Best Horror of the Year Volume 8, editor Ellen Datlow. Laura grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and the setting for Bitter Perfume is loosely based on it. She now lives in sunny California and is the copy editor for the magnificent Shimmer. Her website is www.pronouncedlara.com. It will, of course, be in the show notes. And she has a horror story in Strange California, edited by James Gates and J. Daniel Batt, which should be out now. Your reader for this story is Emily Smith. Emily is a physician living in the Central Valley of California. She's not afraid to put you to sleep, but she is terrified of black widow spiders, heights, and that sudden silence that means a child is up to no good. You can occasionally find her as Fire Turtle on the Escape Artists forums, particularly if there is a flash contest in the offing. So, get ready, because they have a story for you, and I promise you, it's true.
Bitter Perfume by Laura Blackwell. I kissed my great-grandmother on the top of her dusty black wig and asked what she would like for her birthday. I had already sewn her a jewelry roll and mixed her a new skin-softening oil. the best I could afford to do since I had lost my job. But you don't turn 125 every day. Abuelita turned her milky eyes to me and lifted a trembling, withered hand from a rosary to beckon me closer. Quiero morir, she whispered in my ear. I want to die. I shivered, not from the cold of the windowless room, but from recognition. Yo también, I told her in a voice just loud enough for her to hear. Espera, por favor, espera. Me too. Please wait. Grandpa Estevan eyed us suspiciously from his recliner. What are you talking about, Melissa? I straightened up and forced a smile, raising my voice a bit more to carry over the hum of the compressors. I promised her some birthday cake. Would you like some? It'll be good. Sarah made it. He grunted. Sarah's spice cake was a rare treat, and he wasn't too far gone to know it. Just a spoonful of frosting. Can do. I stopped at the controls in the hall on my way out and added some oxygen to their sitting room. The hall door closed behind me, its rubber seals gasping as it shut. In the kitchen, my grown daughter and my elderly uncle were finishing up their boring, but healthy, dinner of vegetables and rice. No meat, hardly any fat, no sugar. Sarah said it would extend our lives. I didn't see the point of life without flavor. Time for cake and presents, I said, unzipping my coat. It was cool in here, but not outright cold, and the sight of the long prairie sunset through the window made me feel toasty. Might as well leave the dishes. There'll be more soon. Okay, said Sarah, rising from her place to spoon leftovers into an old yogurt container. How many plates? 5 plates, 3 forks, and 2 spoons. They're both eating the cake? I'm flattered. Just the frosting. You might want to sprinkle a little extra cloves on it so they can smell it. You bet. They started putting on their coats and gloves. I nabbed the jewelry bag from my room, but I left the skin oil. I would mix her a fresh batch and change up the ingredients a little. While Sarah pulled the cake out from the fridge, Tio Gaspar picked up the small pile of presents. We didn't usually make a big deal out of birthdays, especially Abuelita and Grandpa Esteban's, since they'd had so many. We certainly never invited anyone from outside the family, since we were the only ones who knew Abuelita was still alive. If that was what she really was. I guess we should leave the candles off, said Sarah. She meant because of the heat. I didn't mind, seeing as Abuelita had already made her wish. Grandpa Esteban and Tio Gaspar always had the Herrero name. I took it back after my ex left and changed Sarah's along with mine. She was just little then. Everybody in North Dakota called us the Herreros, pronouncing the H like a harsh gust of wind. Sometimes they called us the Mexican family, although none of us has ever been to Mexico. Abuelita was from Barcelona originally, but the rest of us were born in the U.S. We liked North Dakota okay, though. The air was clean, the food hearty, and people kept pretty much to themselves. I was born in Omaha, which I remember not so much as a place as the time Abuelita could still get around. I should have called her Bisabuelita. She was Grandpa Esteban's mother, but she preferred to have everyone but her son call her Abuelita. I was 7 when the white old lady hairs on her chin fell out and never grew back. After that, we moved to St. Paul, where Grandpa Esteban did refrigerator installation and maintenance for restaurants. It was where I met and married my ex, where Sarah was born. My parents both died in a car accident there. Tio Gaspar came home and cried after identifying them. My soft Tia Rosa, who wore loose clothing and sloshed when she walked, was buried there too. Sarah remembers them all, but barely. My brother still lives there, doing radio voiceovers and murder mystery dinner theater. Grandpa Esteban was born in New York City, but out of respect for Abuelita, he never talked about it. I ate Abuelita's birthday cake for breakfast every day until it was gone. Then I stopped eating desserts after dinner, gave up snacks altogether. You're eating so much better, said Sarah approvingly. That was what I got for sending her to medical school. Even though she's an anesthesiologist, she still knows more about nutrition than man was meant to know. I made Abuelita a new batch of skin oil. I mixed in the powdered remains of the green paint we'd found under the wallpaper of this farmhouse when we moved in. Abuelita liked the house. There was a chance that it was older than she was. She didn't have that experience often in the Midwest. Although the arsenic and the lead shouldn't have much scent, I added a few drops of myrrh oil. It made it smell smoky and thick. In our family, we know a lot of things that people aren't supposed to know. When Sarah started kindergarten, I got a good job at the regional hospital. Doctors dictated, I transcribed. There wasn't enough of anything in particular to specialize, so I heard a bit of everything. Most of it went in one ear and out the other, but sometimes I slowed down a little so I could listen. My turnaround on toxicology reports was never as good as on other things. Autopsies either. Me siento extraña, complained Abuelita as I rubbed the oil into her skin with my gloved hands. Y huelo mal. I fished around for the words to ask, is the bad feeling tingly? Are you losing sensation? But my Spanish isn't all that good, so I just said, Es arreglo, Abuelita, lo que pidió. The gift you asked for. Ah, her blind eyes lit up. Muerte. It was during our first winter in North Dakota that things started to go wrong for the Herreros. Grandpa Estevan was excited about the cold. No urban heat island, no tall buildings to break the fierce prairie winds. Dirty gray snowdrifts buried the shelter-belt trees up to their lowest branches. He knew we'd get frostbite if we stayed out in the snow unprotected. What if Abuelita stayed on the back porch of this farmhouse? Someone had put up screens against mosquitoes at some point. They would hold out most of the snow. Think of how I could slow the deterioration, he said, eyes wide as a child's. I don't like it, I told him. Abuelita won't either. But Sarah was too little to know what was going on, and Tío Gaspar never said a word against Grandpa Estevan. Grandpa and Abuelita sat out there one night over her bitter complaints. When they tried to come in the next morning, Abuelita's left leg, frozen and brittle, broke clean through. Grandpa Estevan developed a cough that didn't go away until there was nothing left in his lungs. The next time he shaved, his whiskers didn't grow back. The month before Abuelita's birthday, one of the 2 HR reps caught me on the way back from lunch. The door of the office next to hers was closed, so I knew what was coming when she sat me down. I'm sorry to tell you that your position has been eliminated, she said. The doctors are going to start using dictation software instead. She pushed a folder across the desk to me. You're not being singled out. The folder included a list of positions and ages of the newly unemployed. There were no names on it, but a glance showed that it was the whole department. The hit list went from the recent college grad up to my manager and me, the only ones in our 50s. I know you'll do well, Melissa. You have great skills, excellent skills, and this is an excellent severance package. I read the whole folder's worth right there at her desk, taking my time. Somebody told me that I wintered well, and although they might have meant plump, I like to think it meant I could wait anything out. The HR rep sat there with an expectant, apologetic smile. The severance was better than decent. I signed the papers and walked out of her office without saying another word. My manager, Debbie, was leaving the other HR office. I guess they took us in order of seniority, she said. At least they didn't make me lay anybody off. She laughed mirthlessly. I'd feel like a murderer. Oh, I don't know, I said, walking toward anesthesiology in no kind of hurry. I don't think you would. Sometimes Grandpa Estevan talked about moving further west. It's getting too settled here, he said one Sunday. All of us had gathered in the so-called living room, the living standing in our coats and the dead sitting down, to listen to Mass on Internet radio. I keep reading that the state's population is climbing. That's out west, Gaspar told him. It's the crude. There's no fracking here, and we'd have to drive through all that activity to get anywhere quieter. Nobody would care about us passing through, and who says we should go somewhere quiet? We can get lost in a city. Sarah perked up at that. She hadn't lived in a city since she went to medical school in St. Louis. Portland, you mean, or Seattle? Maybe. The best place would be Alaska, but that's a hard journey. He looked at Abuelita, hunched in her wheelchair. She was stroking the velvet and the lace of the jewelry roll I'd made her, although she kept it empty. She held it almost as often as her rosary these days. With Abuelita's broken leg that could never heal, it took two of us to even move her from bed to wheelchair and back. Alaska was out of the question. I took turns with Tio Gaspar in the garden that summer, stinking of mosquito repellent and raising the healthy vegetables I didn't much like. They soaked up the long summer sun and got big, huge. My hands grew calloused and clumsy. My arms and legs grew strong. I ate the big vegetables and the plain rice and the boring barley soup. I shed the soft layers of myself. I did not want another winter. One day in September, I went to town to pick up a shipment of our supplies. We have a little lab at home, and Sarah's very handy, but you can't make everything from scratch. Luckily, you can get almost anything over the internet. I was standing in line at the post office when Debbie spotted me. "Melissa, oh my gosh, I didn't recognize you." She was doing okay, she said, working in a doctor's office as an office manager. Bit of a pay cut, but when you added in the severance, not too bad a year. "And you look great, Melissa. You lost so much weight. What are you doing?" "Oh, lots of gardening," I said. "You working?" She eyed the slip in my hand, maybe hoping the carrier couldn't drop off packages because I had a new job. Truth was, we just didn't answer the door. "No, I'm on unemployment. Good until almost Thanksgiving, as long as I keep looking." I did look, but there wasn't much for middle-aged women with excellent skills in medical transcription, skincare, and poisons. Autumn was a brief, brown season. Years ago, when we still went to Mass in town on Sundays, we used to drive a special route in the fall. There were blocks and blocks lined with birch trees, their white trunks striped with black, their branches arcing pale gold overhead. It was like driving through a cathedral. I was always sorry that Abuelita didn't get to see it. Bronze birch borers took all the trees a while back. By then, we weren't going to Mass anymore, so it took us a few years to notice. "Abuelita's not doing good," said Tio Gaspar to me over lunch one day of that last October. Sarah was at work, and Abuelita would be at her rosary. We could hear the compressors chugging along through one of the last warm lunch times in a season tinged with cold at the edges of the day. Grandpa Estevan would not come out into the unchilled part of the house in this heat. "You mean the way she's slowing down?" I asked cautiously. "Uh-huh. It's been a long time coming, and I think she's ready." He locked eyes with me. She never wanted to live the way we do. She thinks it's a sin. After me, Abuelita spent more time with Tio Gaspar than anybody, and his Spanish was better. I nodded and spooned up some more potato soup. "I think it'll be a relief for her. I'm more worried about Sarah," he said. "She's still young. She has better things to do with her life than take care of old people and living corpses." "I don't plan to be a living corpse any time soon," I told him firmly. Tio Gaspar gave me a sweet, almost chummy smile. "Me neither." Once, years ago, I had gotten Grandpa Estevan to tell me about New York. Sarah was thinking about medical school at Columbia, and he wanted me to tell her she couldn't go. "I can't talk her out of it if you don't tell me why you're asking." "It's not a good place for us." "You haven't lived there in must be 80 years. Everybody who knew you and Abuelita will be dead." 85, and they won't remember me, but Mama and I remember New York. His forehead furrowed. My father died when I was young." "Abuelita said you were 8 years old. The flu," she said. "They called it the Spanish influenza. That made it even worse for a young widow and her son. There was no more school for me after that." Although he didn't need to breathe, Grandpa Estevan still sighed when he wanted to. He drew a breath then just to let it out. But Mama was strong. She and I were the only ones in the family who survived, and she worked hard. We had an old house, and she let rooms in it, mostly to other Spaniards, who knew we hadn't brought the influenza. One was a doctor, Dr. Munoz. His usual raspy whisper dropped to a softer, more affectionate sound. I brought him his meals and whatever he needed delivered, supplies, medicine, some of the same things we use today. He was kind to me, like a new father. But Mama... His mouth twisted in disgust. Mama said his work was unholy. After a while, she wouldn't let me visit him any more. No one ever took good care of him again. He passed too soon to learn one of the chants we sing to this day, one that might have prolonged his life. When Dr. Munoz passed, I stole some of his notes, some of his books. His work is the foundation of this family, of our life everlasting. I worked my numb fingers inside my mittens. I had never heard this story before. That still doesn't tell me why Sarah shouldn't go to Colombia if she wants to. Your bisabuelita was fluent in English. What? She had a heavy accent, but she was fluent. But the day Dr. Munoz passed from our home, she stopped speaking it completely. The shock. He gripped my hand in his, bone cold, even with a mitten between us. She's the reason we'll never go back to New York. It would kill her. I told Sarah I would mail her application to Columbia, but I threw it in the trash instead. I have since come to regret that, not just because of the betrayal, but because of the reason behind it. The unemployment payments on my Relia card ran dry in November, and sure enough, I didn't have another job. I'll be fair, I was picky. I didn't want to work someplace chatty, and I didn't want to work far from home. Abuelita was slurring her words and having trouble following conversations. She ran her fingers over the velvet of the jewelry roll until she dropped it from weak fingers. It was hard to be sure, since she'd been blind and bald for years, but I think it was the lead in the paint that was doing the trick. I added frankincense to Abuelita's skin oil to welcome the season and sweeten the scent. She rubbed it into her skin carefully, reverently. I helped apply it to her legs and feet since she couldn't bend to reach them. She still knew the touch of my hand, even through gloves. Abuelita and I were always close in a way that Grandpa Estevan and I never were. Whatever it was that made him want to live forever, we didn't have it. Tu regalo, she whispered. Your gift. With unemployment over and years to go before I was eligible for retirement, it seemed like all I had to give anyone. I ran into Debbie at the post office again just after Thanksgiving. Always the overachiever, she was mailing out Christmas packages. She turned as if she were going to say something, then closed her mouth and looked away. She couldn't tell me I looked great, because I didn't. I was gaunt and graying. I didn't mind. It was a relief, one more connection severed from the world. Abuelita died on December 23rd. I tiptoed in to check on her in her tiny cold room and took off a glove so I could hold her hand as she passed. She didn't breathe, and her hand was already cold, but it went slack, more limp than it did in sleep, and a foul smell crept in under the scent of frankincense and myrrh. I was sorry she didn't get another Christmas Eve. Although she hadn't been to Mass in decades, she always listened to midnight Mass on the radio. She loved the hymns. Vaya con Dios, I whispered. For the first time in years, I dared to kiss her on the cheek. It was tissue soft and very, very cold. Immediately after Abuelita's passing, I trudged through the blowing snow out to the old barn. We used it for storage mostly, but it was also our garage for the RV and the truck. I started the truck in the dark and let it warm up, keeping an eye out for the lights in the house. No one stirred. Careful in the snow, I drove the truck further out into the country, out to the property of a self-described gentleman farmer who spent his winters in Phoenix. I ran the truck into a ditch, Then I made sure the windows were secure, turned up the heat, and peacefully breathed in the fumes as the snow gradually covered the windshield. I woke to the smells of frankincense and myrrh and old woman. Abuelita was gone, and I was in her bed. The jewelry roll was sitting on the dresser, all rolled up as if it actually had jewelry in it. Sarah was sitting in my old place, the chair beside the bed. "Welcome back, Mom," she said. She looked exhausted. "You're just in time for the new year." I tried to speak, but it came out in a whisper. "What?" "You really did a number on yourself." Sarah gave me a sharp look through her tears. "Mom, couldn't you have told me? I could have mixed something for you. Something safer. They kept you in a locker at the morgue for a day. I was afraid they'd do an autopsy on you, just like on Tia Rosa, and you'd never be right again." "Where's Abuelita?" "She died. You knew that, didn't you? You wouldn't leave her." Tears spilled down Sarah's face. "We took you home, and we said we'd bury you, and we buried her in the grave Gaspar made in the barn a while back. We're hoping nobody exhumes it, but if they do, maybe they'll think it's you." "I wanted to die," I murmured. "Really die." "I won't let you, Mom," said Sarah. She took my hand. I felt the pressure, but not the warmth. "I'm an herrero at heart, and we always take care of our mothers." We loaded everything we needed into the RV and the truck over the next 5 days. They packed me into a chest freezer for the journey. "Are you comfortable?" Tio Gaspar asked. "I could get you a blanket for padding. You're not giving off heat." "I'm fine," I told him. "I don't really feel anything." It was just barely nightfall, and the temperature was already dropping. I was outside after dark, without a parka, without gloves, for the first time in months. Gaspar leaned in. "I know why you did it," he whispered. "I would do it, too, if Papa died, or if he wanted to. But you know how he is." Grandpa Estevan started singing to himself. His voice was cracked and tiny, but I could make out, "We three kings of Orient are." "You have relatives in other places," I whispered back. "Omaha, St. Paul, maybe even New York for all I know. Or you could go somewhere new." He shook his head. "I'm going to Portland with you. It's what Papa wants, and where he goes, I go." "Westward leading, still proceeding," sang Grandpa Estevan. "I don't have to agree," said Gaspar. "I'll always stay with my family no matter what we are." He closed the freezer lid gently. I heard some stumbling as he helped Grandpa Estevan in. The whole RV would be cold. Since Grandpa Estevan had never gotten a death certificate, he could have the run of the cabin. "No matter what we are," I repeated in my forceless murmur. "King and God and sacrifice," sang Grandpa Estevan, barely audible through the freezer walls. I heard the RV's motor start, smelled the ammonia anew. I buried my face in my hands. Without breathing, I took in the scents of frankincense and myrrh, the oils I had blended, the scent of our stone-cold tomb.
We live in the eternal now. When we look in the mirror, we see not who we are, but who we were and who we choose to be. Every moment is now, and so now is every moment. And that, of course, is a lie. We age, we change. It's what we do. Our lives completely shift, and while the same person is looking back in the mirror, they're in a different place each time they do it. Sometimes that's bad, sometimes it's not. It's always just how things are. Unless you find a way to change the long now to a long forever. Unless you sacrifice the one thing that, at first, seems an easy loss to take. Mortality. You step back from the world and the friction that slowly erodes us, and you become perfectly, endlessly, you. Radiant. Immutable. Trapped. I've not seen this approach to the undead before, and the only thing I love more than its uncertainty is its pragmatism. You can almost pick and choose the reasons for these events because they don't matter as much as the events themselves, and more so still, the prison of being trapped in that eternal now, in the eternal endless cocoon of tradition and routine and family life. Never changing, watching everything else move around you. A pebble in the stream, denied even the release of erosion. Like Queen said, who wants to live forever? Brilliantly written, brilliantly narrated. Thank you both. We rely on you to pay our authors and cover our server costs, and there are 2.5 ways you can do that, or perhaps 1.99 recurring. I'm not a math guy. The first is to go to pseudopod.org and click on Feed the Pod. There you can either donate, 0.45, or subscribe, 0.45, it adds up. The first is a one-off that will be as much or as little as you need. The second is a set amount. We'd recommend starting at $5. You'd be amazed how much that helps. Alternately, you could subscribe through Patreon. We've got a regular feed of behind-the-scenes stuff there, as well as chats with myself and Karen Bovenmeyer about various popular culture and geeky topics. Also, I know Patreon has been in the news a lot recently for a planned and potentially disastrous shift in their fees that would disproportionately punish lower-level backers, folks who only back at $1 or $2, which is what I do, because that way I can support a lot of people. I'm delighted to report that those charges now will not be happening. So, if you were dubious about backing us on Patreon, please consider it, because the charges that were in place at the top of the year will most definitely be at the bottom. Plus, the stuff we do there is really fun. Oh, and regardless of how you choose to donate, once you do, you will be sent a link and a password that will take you to the Premium Content Vault. It contains all the premium content, and there is a huge amount of it. Just a massive chunk of stories, reviews, and good stuff all up in there. And all for you, if you donate. So if you can, help us out, and we'll give you some stuff. And for the record, and I know I say this every week, but it is always meant. We really appreciate it, and we always need it. So thanks, folks. Patreon.com/escapeartists or pseudopod.org and click on Feed the Pod. We'll be back next week with a fantastic story by Lucy Snyder. Then, As Now will be a production of Escape Artists Inc. and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. And our closing quote this week comes from Time Stands Still by Rush. Let my skin get too thin. I'd like to pause, no matter what I pretend. We'll see you next week, folks. Until then, have fun.